The Mid-Atlantic version of the NWA World Tag Team Championship began as the top tag title in the Mid-Atlantic Territory in the 1970s. There were several other territories of the National Wrestling Alliance that recognized the World Tag Team title, but this version is the one that did go on to be the NWA World Tag Team Championship. We'll take a look at every team that held the title from 1975 to modern day, as the title is still active, but there will be a part 2 to cover the more recent years of the title. There was a Chicago version of the NWA World Tag Team Champions that was recognized in the Carolinas years before, but it's questionable if that could even be considered part of the same lineage. It's a complicated history as it is, so I'll simplify things by starting in 1975. Like other videos of this kind on this channel, it's not a deep dive into each and every title reign. I call it a glorified list of champions, but we will slow down and take a look at some interesting points along the way. There is a lot to this one, so let's get into it. The original name of the title was the Mid-Atlantic version of the NWA World Tag Team Championship. Of course, it was never announced to Mid-Atlantic fans as the Mid-Atlantic version. Just to note, the title was also recognized in Georgia. The lineage officially begins on January 29, 1975, when the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, Gene and Ole Anderson, were said to have won a tournament in San Francisco to win the belts. That was a fictional tournament, and no opponents in the finals were ever announced. Chances are Gene and Ole were no closer to San Francisco than a week off in Minnesota. Gene and Ole had a healthy run of 106 days in that inaugural reign, losing them to Paul Jones and Wahoo McDaniel on May 15, 1975, in Greensboro, North Carolina. It wouldn't take the Andersons long to get the title back, defeating Jones and McDaniel 27 days later on June 11, 1975, during a TV taping in Raleigh, North Carolina. That made Gene and Ole the first team to hold the title more than once, and set them off on a long 230-day reign. That lengthy run came to an end on January 27, 1976, when Rufus R. Jones and Wahoo McDaniel took the belts in Columbia, South Carolina. It was something of a token reign, however, as they lost the belts just a week later, but it was also something of a precursor to a feud between Jones and the Andersons with Ric Flair. Gene and Ole got the title back on February 3, 1976 in Raleigh, North Carolina, starting another long reign of 92 days. Raleigh would be the location again when the Andersons dropped the belts, this time to Dino Bravo and Mr. Wrestling, on May 5, 1976. A lot of wrestlers have used the name Mr. Wrestling, but longtime fans will always associate the name with Tim Woods. Born George Wooden in Utica, New York, Mr. Wrestling was a successful collegiate wrestler, winning 2 Big Ten titles in 1958 and 1959, and finishing second in the NCAA tournament both those years. Wooden entered pro wrestling a little late for the time, debuting in 1962 at the age of 28 under the name Tim Woods. After spending more than a year as a preliminary wrestler in the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, Woods went on to Florida, where he moved into the mid-card, then on to the Carolinas, where he shot up the card and faced Lou Thez for the NWA World's Championship on June 23, 1964. Runs in Tri-State, Western States, and the AWA was followed by a brief run in the small Omaha All-Star Wrestling in Nebraska that planted the seed of changing his career. Promoter Joe Dusick put Woods under a white mask and renamed him Mr. Wrestling. Woods' time in Nebraska was somewhat brief, and he would still appear in the AWA as Tim Woods, but once he moved on to Georgia in 1967 as Mr. Wrestling, he became a superstar. Years later in Mid-Atlantic, Woods was on the plane that crashed and ended the careers of Johnny Valentine and Bobby Bruggers, and almost ended the career of Ric Flair. At the hospital, Woods gave his real name of George Wooden and told them he was a promoter so fans would not know he was the only babyface traveling with heels. When rumors began to circulate that he was on the plane, despite being in severe pain from his injuries, he got back in the ring to squash the rumors. Flair would later call Woods the man who saved wrestling. Woods retired in 1983 and ran a heating and air conditioning business. Mr. Wrestling passed away in 2002 after suffering a heart attack. Wrestling and Bravo managed to keep the World Tag titles away from the Andersons for 54 days, but did drop the belts back to Gene and Ole on June 28, 1976, in Greenville, South Carolina. The Andersons' fourth time around as World Tag Champions lasted 181 days, ending when they dropped the belts to a kayfabe cousin and his tag partner. Ric Flair and Greg Valentine took the belts on December 26, 1976 in Greensboro, North Carolina. Flair and Valentine became the first team not made up of Andersons to hold the belts more than 100 days with a 133-day run. Taking the belts in 1977, Flair and Valentine dropped the titles back to Gene and Ole Anderson on May 8th. How long Gene and Ole held the belts in their fifth title reign depends on which line of the lineage you want to follow. There is some sketchy history around this time, and wouldn't you know, Thunderbolt Patterson is involved. And Tony Atlas and Thunderbolt Patterson were scheduled to face the Andersons for the World Tag title in Augusta, Georgia on August 31st, 1977. Because of what was likely a kayfabe injury suffered in a Texas death match a few days earlier, Patterson was replaced in the match by Mr. Wrestling 2. Atlas and 2 won the match, with 2 surrendering his half of the title to Patterson. However, there is some question if this was ever a title match in the first place. Most sources do not list Atlas and Patterson as ever holding the belts. However, there are some that say they held the belts 11 days before losing them back to Gene and Ole on September 11, 1977 in Columbus, Georgia. I'm going to assume this was something done just for Georgia fans. This kind of thing happened a lot in Texas, where at different times both the Texas Heavyweight Championship and the Texas Tag Team Championship changed hands somewhere, but that one place is the only place it was ever recognized. Fans in the rest of the state were never told the championship was lost. The short Atlas and Patterson run likely wasn't recognized outside Georgia, and Mid-Atlantic fans were never told anything about it. Therefore, it isn't officially part of the lineage, but I did want to mention it. If you happen to be from Georgia, I guess it counts for you. Excluding the thing in Georgia, the Andersons held the tag championship 138 days, finally dropping it to Dick Slater and Dusty Rhodes on September 23, 1977 in Atlanta, Georgia. So there was a title change in Georgia that was a little more high profile and officially part of the lineage. Slater and Rhodes had a fairly short reign of 21 days, losing the belts back to Gene and Ole Anderson on October 14, 1977, also in Atlanta. Gene and Ole followed that with an uncharacteristic short reign of only 16 days, losing the belts to Greg Valentine and Ric Flair on October 30, 1977 in Greensboro, North Carolina. Valentine and Flair's second time with the belts was turning into a very long reign, but ended when they were stripped of the belts on April 5, 1978. The NWA stepped in and dethroned the champions, citing unprofessional conduct and failure to properly defend the title. Valentine and Flair were known to purposely get themselves disqualified so they would lose the match but keep the belts, as well as simply leaving the ring during a match to be counted out, and even no-showing some events. A 10-team tournament was set up in Greensboro to crown new champions on April 23, 1978. Paul Jones and Ricky Steamboat defeated the Masked Superstar and Ken Patera in the final to take the title and begin a 45-day run as champions. Jones and Steamboat dropped the belts on June 7, 1978 to Greg Valentine and his new partner, Baron von Raschke, in Raleigh, North Carolina. There are sources that say this title change came on June 14th, but this was a match taped for television on June 7th and aired on June 14th. Von Raschke and Valentine did actually lose the titles back to Paul Jones and Ricky Steamboat on September 3rd, 1978 in Greensboro, but that decision was reversed by NWA President Bob Geigel. Steamboat won the match when he pinned Valentine, but during a chaotic finish, Steamboat was not actually the legal man in the ring. The decision was nullified, and Jones and Steamboat's 3 days with the belts were not recognized. Valentine and Von Raschke were champions for 202 days, which was the second longest title reign in the history of the championship at the time, finally losing the belts on December 26, 1978, to Jimmy Snuka and Paul Orndorff in Richmond, Virginia. Snuka and Orndorff took the belts into 1979 with a long reign of their own, lasting 111 days, ending when they lost to Baron von Raschke and a now heel Paul Jones on April 16, 1979 in Greenville, South Carolina. Jones had turned on Ricky Steamboat in December. Von Raschke and Jones also had a lengthy run of 114 days, losing the belts to Blackjack Mulligan and Ric Flair on August 8, 1979 in Raleigh, North Carolina. Mulligan and Flair had the second shortest reign in World Tag Title history at that point, only lasting 14 days. Baron Von Raschke and Paul Jones regained the belts on August 22, 1979, also in Raleigh. Von Raschke and Jones' second time with the title was a bit shorter, ending at 63 days when they lost the belts to Jay Youngblood and Ricky Steamboat on October 24, 1979 in Raleigh. As you might imagine, Steamboat and Jones were still feuding after Jones turned on Steamboat the previous December. Youngblood and Steamboat had a healthy run of 157 days as World Tag Team Champions, taking the belts into 1980 before dropping them to Greg Valentine and Ray Stevens on March 29th in Charlotte, North Carolina. Valentine and Stevens held the belts 42 days, dropping them back to Jay Youngblood and Ricky Steamboat on May 10, 1980 in Greensboro, North Carolina. Youngblood and Steamboat had a looser grip the second time around with the belts, losing them after 43 days to Jimmy Snuka and Ray Stevens on June 22, 1980 in Greensboro. That was the start of a stretch of title changes in Greensboro. Snuka and Stevens had a long reign of 158 days, finally losing the title to Paul Jones and the Masked Superstar on November 27, 1980 in Greensboro. Jones and Superstar took the championship in 1981 with a 94-day reign, ending on March 1st when they lost the belts to Ivan Koloff and Ray Stevens. That marked Stevens' third time holding half the title, with his third different partner in about a year. Koloff and Stevens only held the belts 21 days before losing them in the fifth straight title change in Greensboro to Paul Jones and the Masked Superstar, who regained the title on March 22, 1981. We finally get out of Greensboro when Jones and Superstar lose the title again 40 days later, this time dropping them to familiar faces we haven't seen in over 3 years. Gene and Ole Anderson took the title in Richmond, Virginia on May 1, 1981. The Andersons' seventh official title reign would last until almost the end of the year. In October 1981, Gene suffered a very real and very serious injury. Wahoo McDaniel hit Gene in the head with a baseball bat, not intentionally, other than it just ended up being stiffer than intended. Gene continued to get in the ring over the next 2 months, but evidently suffered a series of minor strokes because of the injury. By December, Gene wanted to keep wrestling, and did after a short break, but needed a lighter schedule. Citing his injury and being unable to defend the title, the Andersons were stripped of the World Tag Team Championship, though the exact day it happened is unclear. The Andersons' last defense was November 2, 1981 against Jimmy Valiant and Leroy Brown. Assuming the title was vacated 30 days later, that would end the reign at 215 days, the second longest reign in title history at that point. The vacant championship was filled on February 28, 1982, when Ole Anderson and Stan Hansen were awarded the championship. Their opponents in the final of a tournament, Wahoo McDaniel and Don Morocco, split before the match took place. This led to a peculiar situation fueled by behind-the-scenes drama. Ole Anderson was the booker in Mid-Atlantic at the time and was butting heads with other powers that be in Jim Crockett Promotions. Sometime at the beginning of summer 1982, Ole left Mid-Atlantic along with Stan Hansen, with the champions taking the belts to Georgia, where Ole also started serving as booker. Anderson and Hansen were not officially stripped of the championship in Mid-Atlantic, probably helped by the fact the tag titles had previously been recognized in Georgia, but Jim Crockett Promotions did want their belts back. Finally, on August 22, 1982, after Anderson and Hansen had defended the belts on 3 Georgia cards, Ole agreed to return the belts to Jim Crockett Promotions. Ole even appeared in a 6-man match in Charlotte when he hand-delivered them. The championship was quietly vacated, and it was never mentioned again on Georgia television. Officially, new champions were crowned on September 12, 1982, when Sergeant Slaughter and Don Kernodle began their first run with the World Tag Team Championship. Slaughter had gone on a tour of Japan, and fans were told Kernodle flew over for a tournament, where they defeated Antonio Inoki and Giant Baba for the title. Now, the fact of the matter is, Kernodle never went to Japan, and the tournament was a phantom tournament, though Slaughter did, in fact, spend about a month in Japan. Slaughter and Kernodle were holding the belts when the Los Angeles territory of the NWA ceased operations. Los Angeles was the last territory other than Mid-Atlantic that recognized the World Tag Team Championship, officially removing the Mid-Atlantic version label from the title and making it simply the NWA World Tag Team Championship. Slaughter and Kernodle had a lengthy reign as well, lasting 181 days until they lost the belts to Jay Youngblood and Ricky Steamboat on March 12, 1983 in Greensboro, North Carolina. That made Youngblood and Steamboat three-time champions. This was also a match they had twice, repeating the title change on March 27th in Toronto. As always, we count the first one. Youngblood and Steamboat began feuding with a freshly turned heel team of Jack and Jerry Briscoe, losing the belts to them after 98 days when the Briscoes took the championship on June 18, 1983 in Greenville, South Carolina. The teams would trade the belts back and forth through the rest of the year. Jay Youngblood and Ricky Steamboat regained the title on October 3, 1983, defeating the Briscoes in Greenville. That reign only lasted 18 days, with Youngblood and Steamboat dropping the title back to Jack and Jerry Briscoe on October 21, 1983 in Richmond, Virginia. The Briscoes held the belts just over a month, 34 days, before losing the title back to Jay Youngblood and Ricky Steamboat on November 24, 1983 in Greensboro, North Carolina. Youngblood and Steamboat's fifth world title reign officially lasted 31 days when the title was vacated after Ricky Steamboat announced his retirement from professional wrestling. Steamboat had his retirement match on January 8, 1984 at the Charlotte Coliseum in Charlotte, North Carolina, a DQ victory over Sergeant Slaughter. He was gone about a week and came right back. That January 8th card in Charlotte that featured Steamboat's supposed retirement match was also the side of a 10-team tournament to crown new NWA World Tag Team Champions. Bob Orton Jr. and Don Kernodle defeated Dory Funk Jr. and Jimmy Valiant in the tournament final to take the belts. Orton and Kernodle had a 56-day run with the title, losing it to Wahoo McDaniel and Jay Youngblood's younger brother Mark Youngblood in Charlotte on March 4, 1984. Oddly, Jay and Mark never held the World Tag title together, though they were Florida United States Tag Team Champions later on. McDaniel and the younger Youngblood held the title exactly 1 month, losing the belts to Jack and Jerry Briscoe on April 4, 1984 in Spartanburg, South Carolina. The Briscoes' third time with the belts came to an end 1 month and 1 day later when they dropped them back to Wahoo McDaniel and Mark Youngblood on May 5, 1984 in Greensboro, North Carolina. The Briscoes left the promotion after that and eventually went to the World Wrestling Federation, a notable move considering that was the beginning of a 36-year WWF career for Jerry Briscoe. Just 3 days later, May 8, 1984, in Raleigh, North Carolina, Don Kernodle and Ivan Koloff took the belts to end McDaniel and Youngblood's short run. Kernodle and Koloff had the first reign of over 100 days since Jack and Jerry Briscoe a year earlier, with the run finally coming to an end on October 20, 1984, when they lost the belts to Dusty Rhodes and the Raging Bull Manny Fernandez in a steel cage match in Raleigh, North Carolina. Ivan and his nephew, Nikita Koloff, turned on Don Kernodle after that match. Rhodes and Fernandez also held the title over 100 days, 149 to be exact, finally losing the belts to Ivan and Nikita Koloff on March 18, 1985 in Fayetteville, North Carolina. The Russian team would make use of the Freebird roll during this reign, as they were joined by turncoat Crusher Khrushchev to make a three-man team. The Freebird roll allowed any combination of the three to defend the title. The Russians, and yes, I know they weren't really Russians, were champions when Jim Crockett Promotions bought the World Championship Wrestling TV time slot on WTBS from the World Wrestling Federation. The WWF had taken it over in 1984 with help in part from Jack and Jerry Briscoe. Jim Crockett Jr. also bought out Championship Wrestling from Georgia, the new NWA promotion started by Ole Anderson. Crockett merged Mid-Atlantic into Georgia Territory to create what was commonly referred to as Jim Crockett Promotions. with television on WTBS for the broadcast territory beginning on April 6, 1985. While other titles from Mid-Atlantic were merged with Georgia titles, or Georgia titles were simply deactivated, the NWA World Tag Team Championship simply carried on as usual. If anything, it made the name more appropriate as the territory had grown. The Koloff and Khrushchev team held the belts well into the summer of 1985 with a reign of 113 days, with Nikita and Crusher finally losing the championship to the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson on July 9, 1985 in Shelby, North Carolina. Morton and Gibson had a nice reign of 96 days before dropping the belts back to the Russian team when they lost to Ivan and Nikita Koloff on October 13, 1985 in Charlotte, North Carolina. The second round for the Russians was much shorter, with Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson regaining the belts by beating Ivan and Nikita 46 days later on November 28, 1985 in Greensboro, North Carolina. In between swapping the World Tag title back and forth with the Koloff team, Morton and Gibson had slowly reignited a feud with some old foes that had come into the newly extended territory in July. After a 66-day reign in their second time with the World Tag title, they lost the belts to those old foes. The Midnight Express, consisting of Dennis Condrey and Bobby Eaton with manager Jim Cornette, defeated Ricky and Robert on February 2, 1986 in Atlanta, Georgia. This was the Superstars on the Superstation event and was the first World Tag title change in Georgia since the two territories merged. Condrey and Eaton had a very lengthy reign of 195 days, dropping the title back to Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson on August 16, 1986 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Ricky and Robert almost got through the rest of the year with the belts, but the reign came to an end at 112 days in a televised defense on World Championship Wrestling. Rick Rude and a now heel Manny Fernandez, managed by Paul Jones, took the championship on December 6, 1986 in Atlanta. Fernandez and Rude had a long reign as well, lasting 171 days. Fans were told Rude was injured and Ivan Koloff substituted for him in a defense, but in actuality, Rude had left the promotion and gone to the WWF. Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson were awarded the belts, with fans being told they beat Fernandez and Koloff in Spokane, Washington on May 26, 1987. That was actually a phantom match to get the title onto a new tag team after Rude's departure. Morton and Gibson had another long reign of 126 days, losing them on an episode of NWA Pro Wrestling, which was originally the Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling TV show. The Rock and Roll Express lost the title to two of the Four Horsemen, Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson, in a no disqualification match on September 29, 1987 in Meisenheimer, North Carolina. Ricky and Robert were attacked by the Midnight Express on the way to the ring, with Morton being injured and Gibson wrestling most of the match by himself. The Four Horsemen are one of the legendary factions in pro wrestling history, originally consisting of Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson, Ole Anderson, and Ric Flair, with manager J.J. Dillon. One of the most interesting facts about the Four Horsemen is that it was never intended to be a faction. It all happened by accident. During an interview segment on World Championship Wrestling that aired November 9, 1985, Arn Anderson was speaking just prior to a Tully Blanchard match, talking about all the titles that would be on the line in the coming days. This included the National Tag Team Championship held by Arn and Ole, and the United States Heavyweight Championship held by Blanchard, who was managed by J.J. Dillon, as well as the NWA World Heavyweight Championship held by Ric Flair, who had been presented to fans as a cousin to the Andersons. Arn was holding the belt for the NWA World Television Championship, which was currently vacant after being held up. Arn referred to himself, Ole, Blanchard, and Flair as the Four Horsemen of professional wrestling, the people that make things happen. Arn went on to give a warning to Dusty Rhodes that the Andersons would be keeping an eye on things during his match with Flair for the world title. Ole then accentuated things by saying there's going to be some Andersons and maybe some friends standing around. That planted a seed first noticed by announcer Tony Schiavone, who told Arn once they were off camera, "I think you just named you guys. That's great." At a live event, Arn tested the waters by looking out at the crowd and putting up four fingers. Many people in the crowd responded by doing the same. When he saw what was happening, Ole did the same and got the same reaction. Before long, fans were showing up at TV tapings throwing up four fingers as soon as any of the four made an appearance. The Four Horsemen wasn't created by a booker or a promoter. It was something that just happened on the spur of the moment. Jim Crockett Jr., who had been away at the time, came back to see rumblings from the fans about the Four Horsemen and had to ask what was going on. Luckily, he went with it, and the Four Horsemen were official. Over the years, the members would change and included Lex Luger, Barry Windham, Sting, and Sid Vicious, among others, as they moved into the WCW days, but the original Four Horsemen are the group most closely associated with the name and most often imitated, but never duplicated. In their first reign as World Tag Team Champions, Anderson and Blanchard had a healthy run of 180 days, ending when they dropped the belts to Barry Windham and former Four Horsemen member Lex Luger on March 27, 1988, in Greensboro, North Carolina. The relatively short run for Windham and Luger turned into a pivotal one. Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard regained the World Tag title on April 20, 1988 in Jacksonville, Florida, when Windham turned on Luger and joined the Four Horsemen. Anderson and Blanchard had another lengthy run as champions lasting 143 days, ending when they lost the belts to the Midnight Express, which now consisted of Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane with manager Jim Cornette, on September 10, 1988 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Anderson and Blanchard actually left the promotion after this match and went to the WWF. Eaton and Lane held the belts 49 days, dropping them to the Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal, with manager Paul Ellering on October 29, 1988 in New Orleans, Louisiana. That title change led into a history-making change in the world of pro wrestling. Just days after the Road Warriors took the NWA World Tag Team Championship, Ted Turner purchased Jim Crockett Promotions, changing the name of the company to World Championship Wrestling. Jim Crockett Jr. would remain in the mix somewhat, as he was still the president of the National Wrestling Alliance, but the sale also started a slow burn of phasing out the NWA branding. With the great majority of the territories now gone, what was now known as WCW essentially was the NWA. In the meantime, the Road Warriors enjoyed a 155-day title reign, losing the belts in the same city they won them. Mike Rotunda and Dr. Death Steve Williams of the Varsity Club won the championship on April 2, 1989, in New Orleans, under controversial circumstances. Referee Teddy Long fast-counted Hawk's shoulders on the mat to give Rotunda and Williams the win. And now heel Long would be fired as a referee and become a manager. Rotunda and Williams' tumultuous reign only lasted 35 days, ending when they were stripped of the belts on May 7, 1989. During the defense against the Road Warriors at Wrestle War 89 in Nashville, Tennessee, Varsity Club members Kevin Sullivan and Dan Spivey attacked special referee Nikita Koloff, prompting the NWA to take the titles. The new champions were crowned during Clash of Champions 7 in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, when the Fabulous Freebirds, now consisting of Michael Hayes and Jimmy Garvin, took the belts in a tournament final against the Midnight Express on June 14, 1989. Hayes and Garvin had a lengthy reign of 140 days, dropping the belts to Rick and Scott Steiner on November 1, 1989, in Atlanta, Georgia. The Steiner brothers set off on a very long reign of 199 days, falling 1 day short of being the first tag team since Gene and Ole Anderson in 1981 to hold the belts for at least 200 days. Rick and Scott lost the championship to Doom, consisting of Butch Reed and Ron Simmons, on May 19, 1990, in Washington, D.C. Reed and Simmons were the champions when another change came to the championships themselves. While still technically a member of the National Wrestling Alliance, World Championship Wrestling removed all NWA branding, and the name of all the championships were officially changed to WCW Championships, which included the World Tag Team Championship. The NWA World Tag Team Championship was considered vacant sometime after January 11, 1991. The NWA did continue to recognize now WCW World Champion Ric Flair as the NWA World Champion. However, he was stripped of that title when he left WCW for the WWF. The NWA was now, for all intents and purposes, a company in name only. The National Wrestling Alliance spent the better part of the next year trying to piece together a plan to put themselves back together. More than a year later, the NWA stepped forward with a plan to fill the vacant World Tag Team Championship, approaching WCW Executive Vice President and Head Booker Bill Watts to get help from the same company that put them out to pasture, likely with the reasoning that Watts was more receptive to an association with the NWA. On July 12, 1992, in Albany, Georgia, the Miracle Violence Connection, consisting of Terry Gordy and Steve Williams, defeated Barry Windham and Dustin Rhodes in a tournament final to finally crown new NWA World Tag Team Champions. There was an immediate red flag with the new champions, as Gordy and Williams were also the reigning WCW World Tag Team Champions, and the two tag titles would be defended together. For a short time, while the NWA only recognized their championship, WCW referred to the one set of belts as the NWA-WCW Unified World Tag Team Championship. Gordy and Williams held both sets of belts 71 days, losing them to Barry Windham and Dustin Rhodes on an episode of WCW Saturday Night in Atlanta, Georgia, on September 21, 1992. Windham and Rhodes had a decent reign of 58 days before dropping the belts to Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas in Macon, Georgia, on November 18, 1992 at Clash of Champions. That marked Steamboat's first time with the NWA World Tag title since the Mid-Atlantic days in 1983. Steamboat and Douglas took the belts into 1993 with a 104-day reign, finally dropping them to the Hollywood Blondes, consisting of Steve Austin and Brian Pillman, on March 2, 1993 in Macon, in a match that aired on WCW Worldwide. This happened shortly after Bill Watts' tenure with WCW came to an end, being replaced by Ole Anderson, who was soon thereafter replaced by Eric Bischoff. Austin and Pillman kept both sets of belts for a long reign of 169 days, losing them on August 18, 1993 at Clash of Champions in Daytona Beach, Florida, to Arn Anderson and Paul Roma, members of a revamped version of the Four Horsemen. Lord Steven Regal subbed for an injured Brian Pillman in that match. In September 1993, WCW finally officially ended its membership with the NWA, cutting the paper-thin ties between the two organizations. The World Tag title was now referred to as the WCW World Tag Team Championship, and left the NWA World Tag Team Championship vacant. My original intention was to make this all one video, but as we head into the 1990s and 2000s and the NWA moves more into an association with independent promotions, there are a lot of title changes and still about 30 years to cover. So, much like the NWA World Heavyweight Championship videos, this will be part 1 of part 2. I think this part of the history is one most people are going to be more interested in anyway, but I will do part 2 for those that are curious and to finish out the title lineage. There are some pretty interesting names that pop up in the later years of the title as well. When I have that video finished, I will come back and add a link in the upper right hand corner of this video, as well as on the end screen. For now, I hope you enjoyed this early history of the championship. If you'd like to see more videos like this, click the link on the end screen, or check out one of the other videos on the channel. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, not necessarily in that order, and I will see you next time.